There you go. You get a nice view of my bookshelf. But that's not too enjoyable, is it? Is it? Alrighty. Let's see. Hello, hello, hello. What is going on? What's going on, everyone? Welcome in. I like these lunch and learns. I think they're a lot of fun. And to me, they're a lot better than doing it later in the day. But that's, All right. Let's talk about iron deficiency today. All right. All right. There we go.
Hi.
Hello.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Perfect.
All right. How we doing?
Doing pretty good. Can't get much better than this.
Say, it looks like it's a nice day, so can't complain too much.
It's gorgeous. I just had to drag myself in from the beach to do this.
Oh man, so I'm really just putting a thorn in your side today.
No,
so
you're good. I was working anyways. I was just riding on the beach, so yeah. Happy to dive in.
All right. So I'm glad we're back. We'll do a little bit of a chat here. I know last time we got some interest in talking about like iron deficiency. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm curious, like when you talk about like iron deficiency, like where do you like usually start? Like what is like the first couple things that kind of goes through your mind?
There's so many aspects to iron deficiency that you really have to look at the whole picture. And so, I mean, if you want, I can run through my like top 4 list that is the cause of iron deficiency. But the least common cause is lack of consumption of iron. And really that is where most people come from, oh, I need to take an iron supplement. Like, actually, that's not, and you could be actually creating a larger and more perpetual problem. So when we have iron deficiency in general, there's an imbalance in the body. So let's talk about where does iron come from? Yes, it's consumed from food sources, number 1, right? And so there's this common belief that you have to eat animals, which isn't true. There's tons and tons and tons of plants that are loaded with iron. But iron is also from the red blood cells, and the red blood cells are made by the bone marrow. And this is a huge component that people don't take into consideration is the bone marrow is part of our lymphatic system. So if you have a very acidic body or a highly toxic body, which, can come from anything, drinking tap water, taking pharmaceutical drugs, eating non-organic food, which is filled with pesticides, getting, injections and things, those are filled with heavy metals. So all of these things can start to pollute up our lymph system, which deeply affects our bone marrow and our ability to produce new red blood cells in their ample and proper amounts, which will be one causation of low iron is looking at the bone marrow. One of the second causations that a lot of people don't consider is gut health. And your gut is the foundation of everything. So if you have really bad gut health, right? So that's probably the root. Whatever the reason is that you got bad gut health, whether it's you drink too much alcohol or coffee or have had mold exposure. I see somebody talking about that. These things start to break apart the tight junctions in the gut lining. And like within 30 seconds of exposure to glyphosate, our junctions start to leak. So when we start to lose this ability to produce hydrochloric acid, we will have very low absorption of iron, period. No matter how much iron you take, you're not going to absorb it because your gut acids aren't right. There's also autoimmune conditions that actually attack the parietal cells in the GI, which produce hydrochloric acid. So there's those components to look at is how good is your gut and how clean is your lymph system are my primaries. And then outside of that, I always look at the liver. So what we don't understand is that the liver is what has our ferritin stores, and it also brings in and absorbs iron. And if we have a fatty liver condition, which is very easy to do, it's very easy to get. You can be as skinny as can be and have fatty liver. You can have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Fatty liver is actually more commonly caused now by chemical pesticides and toxic foods. but too much fat on the liver will inhibit these ferritin stores and inhibit the absorption of iron specifically. So those are kind of the primary three. And then there's a fourth that a lot of people don't know about, don't think about, and don't want to think about. And that is parasite overload. Parasites love iron. They love it. And that's what people don't realize is that a lot of times you start taking iron, they start feeling more fatigue, more muscle fatigue. You're literally feeding your pathogen overload. And so it's called iron wasting, where parasites are feeding off the iron. And that's why you're deficient in the iron to begin with. And so I always say, let's defungal and deworm, right? Like defungal, deworm somebody, let's go on a good cleanse, let's flush the liver and support the GI. And those are, generally speaking, the most common causes of iron deficiency. And the last thing I want to mention would be that we can't isolate iron. Iron is a cofactor. So it has to be combined with vitamin C and zinc and like all these different things that are coming from whole foods. And so when you see a deficiency in iron, you could actually be deficient in vitamin C because it's a cofactor and an inhibitor for iron. So yeah. That's my Carrie complex answer.
No, that's honestly fantastic. And there's so many different ways we could kind of go with that. I think the way you started it, I think is probably the most important way that I want to kind of start, like go off on this. And it is like so many times, and I see this a lot, like in functional medicine, even like conventional medicine too, is like when you're seeing like, oh, iron's low, the first response, usually the knee-jerk response is going to be, oh, like an iron supplement or something like that. And like that comes with its own set of issues, but rarely, even in the case of vegans, because I know vegans will generally get ripped apart for this like, oh, like you're not going to have iron. There's plenty of other nutrients we could spend time on another day. But iron's always one that comes up. And again, like it's usually one of those other three causes, you know, liver, gut, or parasites that is causing the deficiency. And like, if we're not taking the step to like look past that, then we're kind of setting ourselves up for more issues. And I do think like talking about, again, if we're in an acidic body, if the bone marrow is, you know, leaching different minerals, say like calcium, it could be a real issue. I was actually talking with my wife this weekend. It's a slight tangent. We had one of my friends who's a doctor kind of come over, and they did a video on root canals. And after the video, I asked her, like, would there ever be a situation where like a root canal, like removing a root canal, replacing a root canal, like would not be indicated? And she was like, actually, yeah. It would be if someone's on bisphosphonate drugs for a long period of time, because it actually makes the bone too brittle. Like you could essentially break someone's jaw. So like we're not going to do a root canal if someone is that depleted. That means, if you think about it, that much calcium has been taken out of bone. And what happens with these drugs is they essentially make bones harder, but they lose their pliability. They lose their flexibility. So you'll see this with more elderly folks. You usually hear like you'll hear get a broken hip, but usually and fall, but usually the hip breaks and then they fall. It's not they fell caused it. It's actually because it becomes so brittle. So it's a similar concept with iron, and for whatever reason, it seems like so many folks are kind of stuck on that first step, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, we have to look at everything as synergistic in the body. Right? Like in nature, you don't have just one nutrient in a food. There's like an entire plethora of nutrients that work together synergistically to provide nourishment to the body. I like to give the example of like robbing Peter to pay Paul is essentially what we're doing when we take isolate chemistry. So when we take something in isolate form and it doesn't have its cofactors with it, it has to start borrowing them, which then causes free radical damage, oxidative stress, increased accelerated aging. I mean, how many people are taking vitamins because they want to be healthy and they don't realize that they're accelerating their own aging?
Right.
Just wanted to make mention of that. I saw in the comments somebody saying, how do you know if you have parasites? Well, everybody has parasites, period. You should defungal and deworm at least 2 times a year. That's my theory always. We get exposed to them all the time. If you eat animal products or dairy, you're or fish specifically, you're exposed to a significantly higher amount of parasites. Wash your produce, but they're in nature. They're part of our ecosystem. And it's about managing that parasite load. We could do an entire live maybe next week on parasites, but yeah, parasites in general, there will be lots of different symptoms like brain fog, fatigue, cravings for sugar, starch, fatty foods, sometimes irrational thinking, anxiety, depression, even so psychosis is very deeply connected to parasite overload because they hijack your nervous system and you're all autoimmune in any way, shape, or form. If you have autoimmune, you have parasite overload, period.
Yeah.
The body says there's an intruder in my house. There's so many, I can't tell what cell to attack, what not. And that is really the birthing of autoimmune. So I think defungling and deworming is the first step in all vitality and life force.
I would tend to agree, and I think that's actually like a good schedule, like at least once or twice a year to go through kind of like a deworming, so to speak, is probably a good schedule. I mean, we have countries like India that do this all the time anyway. Like, this isn't news. This isn't something that's like some wild or abstract, concept. It's just here in America.
Literally every country I've ever been to in the world has a phase called the purge. Like when I was in Bocas Islands, Panama, they were preparing for the purge. The whole island was drinking noni juice and broths, and like they were on these parasite herbs, and they're like, oh yeah, we do this 3 times a year. Like, it's just seasonal. That's just what they do. And I learned that when I went to Bali, same thing. I mean, it was just really, really amazing. All over the world, everybody knows you defungal, deworm. And back in the States, there used to be that saying like turpentine and sugar for the kids. That's where that came from, is they would give the kids turpentine and sugar because the parasites will follow the sugar, but the turpentine would kill the parasites. And that used to be how we dewormed our kids. And then we got into this mentality that Americans don't have parasites and we're a developed country. And I will tell you, as an owner of a clinic that has detoxified thousands of people, I have seen hundreds and hundreds of worms come out of people over the years. So we do have parasites. It's very much so in America, and we just have to realize that it's part of our ecosystem. We have to flush it.
Yeah. It happens, and it's not that necessarily like all of them are bad all the time. It's again, like trying to find a balance. I also think it's interesting. We have so many like cultural like places that do this type of thing, but a lot of major religions, if you think about it, have some sort of like fasting built into their religious calendar, which can kind of be looked at in a similar way, which is similar to like a sort of purge. And I find it interesting how there's kind of like a spiritual side to it too. I was raised Catholic, so I'm familiar with Lent and such, but I mean, Jewish religion, Muslim religion, plenty of them have fasting practices just built into their religious calendar, which is kind of wild how that, I don't know. I don't know if that was initially the intent, but it's just an interesting concept that I see kind of pop up.
Well, it's so synergistic because, I mean, we are primarily spiritual beings having a physical experience, period. So it's like when we go into a fast, like I'm on a juice fast right now. I have been for a while, and it's like once we decide, it's just easy. But there's this like deep level of spiritual awakening that starts to happen when you're not distracted by toxic foods and addictions and all of that. So it really is just like the process into getting deeper into who you are and who your blueprint is. So I see that the physical and emotional are combined, or the spiritual and the physical are combined.
Absolutely. I think honestly that's the most important part of the healing process is whether it's more emotional or spiritual for the person in front of you. It's if that's not like aligned with where you're at, that I find is like a big predictor of success versus what is the physical experience, the physical symptom that you might be having at a given time. But that is such a huge part of it. And like to kind of build on the parasite point, like if there is some sort of overgrowth, let's say, like that's gonna come from either poor liver function or poor gut function. So that's like where that root cause, so to speak, like kind of is, or at least where it starts. And then that is like that's how you kind of keep it as at bay as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So parasites, like, really are just there to kind of clean up the dead or decaying tissue, more or less. And if that's not happening, or if that is happening to a larger degree, that's how you know, okay, what are the tissues that are not maybe functioning at the level they probably should.
Correct. And parasites also come in to eat up heavy metals. So if you have a heavy metal overload, you'll have more parasites. And then you want them to leave after those are consumed. I studied a lot of Dr. Klinghart's work, and he showed that when he would study parasites that people passed, they had 600 times more heavy metals than in the human. So they are serving a deep purpose, but we want to get them out and flush them out after their purpose is finished. But yeah, when it comes back into iron, this is a huge piece that people don't realize, is they could have a massive parasite overload that's eating up their iron. And then if we want to talk about getting to the root cause of fixing this, we would start focusing on the gut, remove the pesticides, remove the glyphosate out, start repairing the tight junctions, and then repopulating the gut with healthy, whole food, regeneratively grown plant medicine. That's really what we focus on. It's like, eat your greens, drink your greens, get a good micronutrient support, but you have to clean out the environment first.
Yeah. Like, we have to get to a point where we can absorb and assimilate this stuff, because ultimately that's going to be what dictates, are we getting enough? Because the quantity usually isn't an issue. Heavy metals can absolutely also do it too. So again, in my wife's practice, they'll do saliva analysis, and you can actually see different types of parasites or amoebas in the saliva, and you will see them in larger amounts with folks who have, again, root canal infected teeth or mercury amalgam fillings. So if that could be a potential cause, then it might be working in that direction too, getting rid of whatever that excess toxic burden is. If it's a digestive component, say it's poor stomach acid function, is that a stress component? Is that a dietary component? So a lot of acidic foods that Carrie was talking about, alcohol, caffeine, a lot of excess sugars, all that's going to negate your ability to create enough stomach acid to break some of this stuff down. And then that puts more burden on every other organ that's involved in digestion, essentially down the chain. So you it depends on what your lifestyle is like. It depends on what is the particular root cause. It could be the stomach. It could be, again, the liver, gallbladder. It could be something else along that road that's allowing this thing to kind of come in. So that's kind of, from there, that it's essentially, like you said, it's getting those things in, it's alkalizing, it's identifying which one of those root causes it is, and then kind of going at it appropriately.
Yeah, and what I like to say to, a lot of my students, at the Institute is, people are like, well, how do we know which one it is? Well, here's the great thing. It doesn't matter, because the body cleans up as one unit. So as you start to move into an alkaline environment and you approach detox, the body is detoxing systemically. And what the body will do is work in the area of its own priorities. So the body might start with the liver, it might go with the gut, you will work in your own priorities as you start to enter detoxification. So get your body into an alkaline environment, get on a detox protocol, and the body's going to do the rest for you. The liver's going to clean out at the same time the gut is cleaning out. The body works as one unit. Yeah.
And ultimately, that's, I think, where the philosophical difference lies, is nature doesn't necessarily make mistakes. So, if you're just giving it the support it needs, all this stuff is happening for one reason, one way or another. Whether we understand it or not is another story. But if we get the support we need, if we're doing the things we should, like we were talking about, cleansing maybe twice a year at least, and not putting the toxins in the environment, we already have the mechanisms inside of us that allow this stuff to flush it and keep it clean. It's just a question of are we supporting it?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, we could do an entire call on elimination pathways, but those are also the primary things that, you want to discuss. Is you have 4 main elimination pathways in the body, and it's the kidneys, the urinary system. That's how we filter out lymphatic waste and cellular waste. The bowels, which is not just food waste. We have to remember that the bowels are also large organ waste. Cellular waste is being dumped into the colon and then removed. And then we have the lungs, which is one of our largest detoxifiers. 70% of toxic waste is emitted through the breath, and then the skin. So what's on the skin is a reflection of what's inside. So if we don't have those detox pathways open, we're going to have problems internally and systemically.
Yeah, that's 100%. Like, and I mean, I'm sure you get it too. Like, I've had folks ask me like if or what I use for like a skincare routine. I'm like, I don't use anything. It's literally what I eat every day. Um, like, I think we need to start thinking about it a little differently as far as like what we're doing or what we're putting on and utilizing. Because when we do, again, it's just a reflection of what's going on inside.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole nother life for a whole nother day. So we can come back next week. I have finals for my students next week at the Institute, and we're launching a new cohort. That's my last cohort of the year is launching. So I'm going to have a busy couple weeks. So our timing might be a little bit different. I'll look at my schedule and we'll get back on. Maybe next week we can talk about parasites and elimination pathways, because it seems like there's a lot of questions around that coming in the chat. And yeah, it's like I deworm my kids. You should defungal deworm your kids, you know, seasonally. Like there's really great lines for gentle kids tummy cleansing and all of that, because it can really mess up their nervous systems and their neurodevelopment as well. So we can talk about parasites next week. Stay tuned for the time. I have another call that I'm going to on quantum frequency right now, and actually the energy and the emotions that are connected to each organ in the body. So like, you know, like spleen and worry and different things, like when we're dealing with lack of forgiveness, and that's the kidneys. So we're going to be kind of deep diving into that with Dr. Michelle Patrick. So I got to run for that, but let's look at next week at a good time.
Yeah, that sounds good. Parasites, deworming, etc. sounds like a fun topic, since a lot of what we talk about ends up coming down to that, doing that anyway. So let's get that out of the way. I like it.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks for having me on. Have a great day, everybody.
Likewise. Have a good one. Bye.